Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Post PhD Directions. And today we have Angela Priest back again for a coffee chat. Today we thought it would be really cool to talk about CV/resume mistakes. And I just chatted with Angela. Here in Europe, we call it a CV. In the UK and in the US, they call it a resume. So, for the sake of simplifying it, we call it a resume. We thought it would be nice to talk about what are some common mistakes that we see over and over. Angela has worked in hiring for over 20 years. She has seen thousands of resumes. She has reviewed many resumes. She has talked to many candidates, and she is doing a lot of work evolving around this with Alma Me too. With this, welcome, Angela.
Thank you. It's always fun to come on the coffee chats with you. Although today I'm drinking water. I'm not drinking coffee because I don't need the caffeine buzz going on today.
I mean, it's still surprising. What's the time? 6 a.m.?
No, it's like 8. It's 8 a.m.
Oh, it's
here.
8.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so it's a normal
you
time.
didn't catch me rolling out of bed this time.
Like I usually do. Is yeah. I'm so glad you start working so early because I don't know how this would otherwise work from Denver to Stockholm. It's great to have you, Angela, and I really want to tap into your expertise today. And talk about what are some common mistakes. Can you give us a broad overview and then maybe we can just zoom into these different mistakes?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the most important things to recognize is in those thousands of resumes that I have reviewed over the course of my career, I have never seen two resumes that are the same. I've never seen two resumes that follow the same format. I've never seen two resumes, even for the same position, where it articulates people's skills in the exact same way. So I think the first and most important thing for people to recognize is that your resume is a tool. Ultimately, the purpose of that tool is to get you an interview. The purpose of that tool is not even to get you the job. The purpose of that tool is to get you an interview. The purpose of the interview is to get the next interview. And then once you get there, the purpose is to get a job. So you have to think about things as there's a series of stages that you go through. And at each stage, each tool that you use serves a particular purpose, and it's just to get you to that next stage. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is trying to do everything with one tool. It's like, I'm going to put my resume together, and this resume is going to get me the job. And that's just not the reality of the situation. That's not how we use resumes. I have never heard of an instance where somebody saw a resume and went, I'm hiring this person today. That just doesn't happen. And so the purpose of the resume really is to get you an interview. And when you think about it from that perspective, a lot of the other things become a lot more clear in terms of how you do it. So there's a few different kind of things when I think about a resume that make a resume effective. And then there's a few things that happen that make them less than effective. But the most important thing when building a resume is that it tells a clear story around who you are, what you can do, and why you're a good fit for the particular role that you're applying for. Now, a lot of people actually take that to mean I have to go and create a new resume for every job that I apply for, but that's really not the case. But in order to get to that place where you're not having to create a new resume for each job position, you actually have to do some self-reflection and understand what is it that you really want to be doing, and you set your resume up for that particular type of job or kind of family of, so that way when you're kind of going to apply for different positions, you don't have to edit it every single time because it's already set up for that particular type of role. Big mistakes that I see people make: the 11-page resume. That's not fun for anybody. That's not fun for you to write it. It's not fun for us to read it. And when we look at those types of resumes, you have to remember that we're not only evaluating kind of what we see, we're evaluating what we experience too with that particular resume. So the 11-page resume, my first impression of that person is they can't be succinct. And I hear this from hiring managers as well. They look at a resume that long and they go, this person doesn't know how to communicate. And so pass. Other ones, they're over designed where it's almost like cheesy and there's these kind of cheesy graphics that are in it. I sometimes see charts in resumes. Those charts don't have any meaningful value. Everybody uses those charts differently. I don't understand kind of what's on your X or your Y axis. Like it's charts are so subjective and the ATS system can't read them either when it's parsing information. So sometimes things get distorted or it just doesn't come through the way that you expect. So that's another thing. The over-designed resume, typically those are done by people who are not designers, or they've used some resume template somewhere that has all of these design elements and it seems kind of cool in concept, but they're not really good at communicating the kind of what we call in the US, the meat and potatoes, like the things that I really care about are not often communicated well graphically. And then there's the third type of resume, which you open it up and there's so little information that it's like, I don't even have anything to evaluate in here. So those are kind of the three big types of mistakes that I see made. The one where there's so much content that it's hard to even distill it into something meaningful. The graphical ones where it doesn't even make sense. And then the resumes that have so little information that I can't even really evaluate the person. There's not enough information there to even evaluate them for the job.
So, and that's now, first of all, I wanted to make a joke when you said, I've never seen two of the same resumes. And I was like, you clearly hired before ChatGPT was a thing.
Oh no, I aged myself.
No, but I guess we can talk about ChatGPT too. So, because I think that's also something, I think it's usually quite generic and it's just important to say,
Yeah.
Use it, but use it for the right things.
Yeah,
Right.
use it to help you edit. You don't use it to create it for you because it will regress you to the mean and it'll make you look like every other candidate out there. It just washes out any personality from the resume whatsoever, or it elaborates things in a weird way where it just kind of feels not human. You can kind of, and that's a weird way to think about looking at resumes, but when you think about your resume, you're actually making an impression. And hiring is a lot done based on feeling. I know a lot of us would like to remove the bias. We do what we can to remove the bias, but a lot of hiring is done about feeling. And so when you think about the feeling that an electronically generated resume leaves you with, it doesn't actually create any connection to you. It uses, to your point, Elena, these washed out words and these generic words where it's just like, this could be literally anybody. And this person is not differentiated at all from any other candidate. They just look like everybody else.
To your points, now you mentioned a lot of points in terms of not enough information, graphically over designed. When I did my own PhD, and I have a feeling sometimes when I talk to PhDs, what we're trying to do is always we try to want to showcase everything we all ever did. So everything we ever did needs to go into this resume to showcase I can do the job. Coming back to understanding what's the role you're targeting, who are you, where do you want to go, and what are the relevant skills and the relevant information you should show that you can actually do a particular job. Is this also something you have observed, that it's like often it's just everything in there rather than, okay, I tailor, these are the requirements for the job, so how can I actually showcase in my resume that I have the skills to do the job?
Yeah, I see that a lot where it's trying to get everything in there. And this happens in interviews too. And I actually coach against when folks are going into interviews as well, because there's this desire to get everything out. It's almost like get everything out in one breath. And when you do that, again, if you were to walk in and introduce yourself to somebody for the first time and you're making a first impression, if you try and get everything out in one breath, you're probably going to overwhelm them. And some of the detail is actually going to get lost. Like, in some circles, you'll hear this is like, you're burying the lead. You're burying the most important information in detail. And so when you do that as hiring managers or as recruiters, we can't even see what's important because you haven't prioritized. So point number 2 in the you're leaving an impression, if you're giving too much information, can you communicate succinctly? And also, can you prioritize the most important points? So when you think about your resume as a story, think about it like the teaser to the movie. Like once you get hired and you're in the position, that's when the movie actually happens. That's when everybody can see everything in action. But your resume is there to give people a sampling of the types of things that you can do and the types of results that you can achieve. It's not there to give every fine detail about everything that you've done. And you've got to present this information in a very balanced way. So for example, when you're talking about a particular technique, and it's hard to balance, and I totally get that. This is a struggle. This is a struggle for people who have even been in the workforce. Resume writing is a skill, and it's a skill that most people use every few years or so. It's not something that you're coming up with, you're using all the time. So it degrades and you got to refresh and do all of that stuff. So when you're thinking about this, if I'm presenting my experience, so a lot of my business background is business transformation and operations, which is where the team building comes from, because good operations start with good engaged teams. The way that I might frame my experience, it can happen in different ways. So I can say I implemented standard project management approaches to improve productivity. It's not a bad statement. It tells what I did, but to somebody who doesn't know me and isn't familiar with my work, they're not going to really understand why that's even meaningful. Whereas if I say, I implemented standard protocols and procedures to deliver customer data, improving productivity by 30% while reducing costs by 25%. That suddenly gives a richness to what I did, and it does it in a very clear and succinct way. So it says, what I did, I implemented standard processes, and to what end or what result. I improved productivity and efficiency. That's valuable to a business. And so when you're thinking about your resume, you also have to think about it from the perspective of your reader. So I actually, this is an area where a lot of PhDs struggle and get stuck and sometimes get really angry, because it's like, I'm a PhD. Just by nature of that, you should know how good I am. Which, to be fair, like, you've spent a lot of time and energy. We recognize in industry that a PhD means that you have some depth to your skill, but we're looking for more than the degree. We're looking for somebody who we can easily work with, who's easy to work with, and we're looking for somebody who can bring value. So if you have all of these wonderful skills, but you can't create a result with them, then that means that you may not be the right fit for what we're looking for. So, and publications don't generally make most companies money. That's not how it works. So we're looking for things that create tangible value within our business, either in the form of cost savings or speed or efficiency or productivity. So when you look at the work that you've done, what tangible benefit does it create? Like when you are, I have a post out today talking about, the difference between saying I created water filtration systems and I created a water filtration system that reduced costs by X, and while increasing the quality of the water while increasing water quality, right? So those are things that actually can directly link to success for a business. And so you want to really link your kind of experiments and research and things that you've created, not so much to publications, but to tangible results that businesses can use. If they bring you in there, you can do those things for their business too. And that's kind of what we're looking for. And I think that's some of the tension that sometimes exists between, PhDs and how they feel about their research and how businesses feel about their skill.
So what I really would add here is, can only communicate well if you know who you're addressing. And I think this is where PhDs already struggle, because they don't know who they're addressing. And I think it's very important to know that the person you're addressing in the first place is in most cases a recruiter. And there are different type of recruiters. While there are recruiters out there who have a PhD, that's not the case in most cases. There are many recruiters that are maybe internal. Yes, they work in pharma. They have more experience within that subject of everything around pharma. So maybe they're a bit, more experienced when it comes to the skills usually people bring. Although in pharma, you can also find all sorts of different roles from project management to R&D. And of course, you have the external ones that people hire. They hire for all sorts of roles. And like just what you said, coming in with this eye of understanding, they're not a professor who has worked in this field for a very long time, who has gone through the same education. So this is the first thing, and I hope you will maybe also do a short comment, because I think it's so important that we make PhDs aware who are you addressing in the first place. Because if you don't know who you're addressing, you don't know which language to speak, and this is so important. And then to your second point, because I know this is a struggle, the language to use. We talk about impact-based language, going from a very descriptive statement to showing the impact you brought. And now I can already probably see a lot of listeners sitting here and thinking, it's easy if I do a PhD in a very applied field. STEM fields are very applied. When you talk about water systems, I can see the application immediately. But what about the humanities, where I know you work with 3 humanities PhDs at the moment? How do you think could they make the translation of their skills to, even if it's not a super applicable skill?
Yeah. So humanities degrees are in high demand if you can transfer the skill. We've got multiple people in our job offer accelerator program who are doing really well in their processes. They're getting interviews, but it's because they took the time to really understand the type of role that they wanted. So STEM and humanities majors really have different challenges, because when you're humanities, you have a broad swath of things that you can do. And so it's really a process of narrowing down all of those opportunities. On the STEM side, what I often see is they're so niche in what they do that it's kind of about how do we expand that out so that they can see that their skills are applicable in more areas than that just one niche. So when you're thinking about like humanities, you want to think about the things that you did that created progress. And it's really no different with STEM. It's how did you help create progress in your field? So if you are a STEM major who wants to go into communications, for example, there are lots of different flavors and varieties of communication. There's employee engagement, there's public relations, there's investor relations, there is marketing there, and even within marketing, there's different threads of it. So you can think about marketing in terms of digital communications or traditional media, and you'll see that in the job descriptions. And so what you really want to take a look at, it might not, in the humanities, it might not be as much about your subject matter as about how you navigated your subject matter. So for example, if part of your PhD, you created a program for a particular population, then you're going to talk about the program that you created, how you went about creating that, and the results that program either achieved or had the potential to achieve. Because you could talk about things in terms of potential as well. Oftentimes there's a lag between the thing you did and the actual results achieved. So you can talk about the potential impact of those things as well. I'll give you an example. For me, throughout my career, I actually have my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And so when I apply for different positions, or, I've gone through, been selected for kind of leadership development things, and you have to go through this application process and whatnot. But one of the interesting things to me is people always pick that up on my resume and they go, "You have your master's degree in marriage and family therapy. Why are you doing business operation?" And for me, I can actually clearly link that, which is, Marriage and family therapy is a thread of psychology that's based on systems theory. And when you're looking at organizational design and organizational structures and process and those types of things, those are all systems that are grounded in people behaviors. And so if you can understand the inner dynamics of a people system, you can generally fix process and organizational design and all of those things. So even though superficially it doesn't seem related, business operations and marriage and family therapy, you can kind of use it in that way. And I kind of, will throw in a little humor there too and go, yeah, we all need counseling here, so hire me, But when you think about the humanities, a lot of the humanities are about understanding people systems, human behaviors, how human behaviors link to different things, how decision making and or policy or historical context drives to where we are now. And those are all kind of demonstrably, ways of thinking. One of the hardest things in business is when you get somebody who can't kind of, think constructively and you have to teach them to think. One of the hardest things to do as a manager is teach someone how to kind of think and reason and ration. And there are cases where that happens. So the humanities, though, oftentimes they've got that thinking already embedded by nature of having to deal with these very ambiguous constructs and take kind of these big concepts and put some order around them. Some other things that I think about, but that kind of leads me back to what we started this conversation was with, which is it's important to focus your career search. When you go and you dump everything that you've ever done into your resume, or if you're in Europe, your CV, it lacks focus. It's hard for me to kind of find the golden thread of what links all of that experience to my job. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who might say, well, it's your job to find the highest quality candidate. That makes the assumption that there aren't very high quality candidates who can communicate in that way. And there are. So those are the type, it's not just about who is reading your resume, it's about who you're competing against. And you're competing against people for jobs who have a really, really phenomenal ability to communicate what they can do in a succinct way. So I think those are two things that need to be considered. And when you think about my role isn't just to find a high quality candidate, isn't just somebody with the highest technical skill. That's kind of a misunderstanding that often happens. My job is to find the best quality candidate who will also be a good fit within the team. Because if I bring in somebody who has all of these qualifications and crosses every T and dots every I, and I bring them in and the team doesn't like them, that's going to affect the performance of my team. It's going to slow my team down because now I'm dealing with interpersonal conflict. It's going to take me away from the things that I need to be doing as a manager, and it's ultimately going to make my job harder. And so I want to bring in people who are going to get along well with my team, who are going to help amplify them, but who are also going to learn from them. So it's not just all about that technical skill. Now, for a recruiter, recruiters are oftentimes, I'm kind of guiding them in the type of person that I'm looking for. So they're taking cues from me. Oftentimes recruiters are going to be more junior level people who don't have as much technical background, but their job is to protect my time from candidates who I would never say yes to. So they're looking for people who can make a good impression. They're looking for people who are going to be committed to the job. They're looking for people who meet certain surface level criteria that I've given them to assess candidates for. And they actually get evaluated based on the quality of the candidates that they send me, how quickly they can fill my roles for me, and whether or not those people ultimately end up being good hires and staying. So when we talk about quality candidates, it's not just you pass the initial test, but it's did you come in and stay and make the impact that we thought you were going to make? So it's not as simple as just checking things off a list and saying you meet all of the criteria.
Yeah, and I think it really comes back the communication part, being able to communicate in a very concise manner or succinct is important, because I was actually thinking, is there any position in business where you don't actually need to communicate? And I think the answer is probably no, but it also shows the importance of already demonstrating that you have that skill by providing the information, knowing your audience, and based on the information you have about your audience, but also the role to communicate how you could do the job for your audience.
Your resume is a selling tool, and I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but it's a selling tool. You are pitching yourself for the job. So as a hiring manager, I'm looking for that person who just pitches themselves well. If they pitch themselves well, there are a lot of kind of linkages between somebody who can do that in the job interview setting and ultimately the results I get out of them when I bring them into my organization. So when I think about the types of things that I'm looking for, I am looking for that person who can communicate concisely. One of the reasons as a hiring manager, and now I kind of tend to hold more executive level positions, so it's a little different for me before, but when I'm hiring for a mid-level person, if I'm going to put them in front of my executives, I need to know that they're not going to embarrass me, and I'm not going to have an executive coming back to me and saying, oh my gosh, that person would not stop talking and I couldn't understand what they were saying. I hear that a lot from executives, where executives say they talk too much. They wouldn't get to the point. And so when you think, and that's the senior level interview. So you've got the recruiter, you've got the hiring manager, and then you've got the senior level interview. I have to make sure that you're going to pass muster with that executive level person as well, because if you don't, then I'm in conflict with my boss potentially, right? So and again, now I tend to hold that more senior level role, and it's the same thing. Don't send me a candidate who cannot clearly and succinctly communicate their point, because at my level, I don't actually have the time to sit beyond the point. So that ability to be concise is a huge factor in business. And when you think about it, and what I tell people in our programs is when you get into these roles, more than 50% of your time is going to be spent communicating. If you're lucky, you're going to be spending 25% of your time doing the actual tasks of your role, depending on the company. Industry is a team sport. And so you have to be able to bring people along with you when you're getting your work done. And if you can't do that, if you can't communicate, if you can't keep people engaged, then you're just slowing down everyone around you. And that goes beyond technical communication. So a lot of times I hear PhDs and they go, well, I am a great technical communicator. And it's like, this isn't about technical communication. This is about being able to influence people. It's about being able to keep people engaged. A lot of that actually comes down to interpersonal skills and your ability to build relationships more than anything else. So it's not just those formal technical writing skills that we're talking about. It's the relationship building skills too. Now, I will say that we do make concessions for certain roles, and we do understand that for certain types of people. For example, I'm not expecting a software engineer to be super interpersonally savvy necessarily. And when we're hiring for those roles, everybody knows you're going to get kind of like the people who are the geeky coders and stuff like that. And that's totally, totally fine. But we're still looking for people who have an ability to get along well and communicate with their peers. That's a must-have.
I would also like to add something, because I do know you made a post on LinkedIn and it was about that at the end of the day, it's all about, who can communicate in an interview, but also in a resume in a concise way is more likely to get the job. And I remember you had a comment from someone saying, yeah, but what about all the skills I got? Does that not really matter? Is it just that people get hired who know how to pitch themselves, but don't actually have the skills? And I think it's very important that we clarify that's not the case. You can be very skilled, but you can still communicate in a very concise way. So do not feel like people who have a lot of skills, just because they don't get a 10 minutes platform to talk about all of them, are not hired. You can be the skilledest person in the world and you can still be concise in communicating them. And it's about understanding what's the right information to add, what's the right amount of information to add. This is the communication skill. Who is my audience? What do I need to tell them? So even if you have all these skills, that doesn't mean you have to talk about all of them. And I just wanted to say, it's not that you don't need any skills and you just need to know how to pitch yourself. It's not true, because at the end of the day, I can see that there are amazingly skilled scientists out there that they don't have necessarily the best communication skills, and they now feel like, but I'm in a disadvantage. And the reality is you probably are. So I encourage PhD programs. We need to learn how to talk layman language, really, because this is what it's critical when you move outside of academia. You need to be able to communicate with stakeholders across the company. I just wanted to clarify this because I can see maybe this is something where people go like, but what? I mean, should I hide my skills?
Yeah. And it's not about hiding your skills. It's that if you think about your, like, when you look at like a painting, for example, right? You've got your painting, you've got the Mona Lisa sitting in front of you. And part of viewing the Mona Lisa is the frame around it. So you can think of your skills like the painting itself, and then your communication skills are like the frame around it that kind of directs the eye or directs the ear to the things that are really important for people to understand about you. And so it's not about hiding your skills, but one of the things that I will say to people is some of the most skilled people I know in industry, when you speak with them, you will never realize like they don't speak in jargon. They speak in plain language, and that's part of what makes them so skilled, is that they can take these really really complex concepts and break them down in ways that people can understand. One of the people I actually love listening to the most, I think he's a physicist or something like that, really smart, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Really smart guy. He can talk on just about any topic in a really thoughtful way. But if you notice the way that he actually speaks in plain language. And what that does is that makes his skill and his science accessible to the masses. And that's so, so critically important. It's not about sounding smart. You are smart. You don't have to sound smart. It's not about sounding like an expert. You don't have to sound like an expert. You are an expert. And so, we kind of the accelerator program that we run, where we are doing coaching every week with different candidates. One of the things that is always a revelation is when these folks get into the job interview process, and when I tell them, just go in and be yourself. And when we first start working with them, oftentimes they're kind of getting stuck in like jargon or buzzwords, or they speak haltingly because they're trying to find that right precise word to say that highlights their expertise. And then they don't move on to the next interview. And then we put them through the program and we go, just go in and be yourself. Speak in plain language. There's no one word that's going to show how skilled or experienced you are. And honestly, just go in and try and make these folks your friends, because the reality is that if you get hired, they will at some point probably turn into professional friends. And suddenly, when they do that, they start getting to the next round of interviews and the next round of interviews and the next round of interviews. And it's because they remove all the technical jargon from the way they're speaking. And so they become more relatable as a person. And people, when you become more relatable as a person, this wonderful thing happens and people start actively listening to you speak. You don't lose them in the jargon. And that's true even with more technical people in the interview. Oftentimes, they're not going to be familiar with your specific science, because a lot of PhDs have a very, very niche kind of area that they're focused on. And so even for those people, you have to make your science and your expertise more accessible and why it's relevant, and help them get excited about it the way that you're excited about it by making it accessible through the language that you're using. So it's not about hiding your skill. It's not about, like I've heard some people say, oh, I have to dumb myself down. It's not about dumbing yourself down. It's about framing it in a way that people can understand what you're saying. Like, it's like the difference between speaking Spanish and English. If I talk in Spanish, I'm going to lose my listener. It's no different when you get into these kind of more detailed and in-depth scientific kind of realms where you're speaking about things that people may or may not have an understanding of. And if they don't have that understanding, it doesn't make them less skilled or competent. And I have to say that because this is another thing that I hear is like, well, they're just incompetent if they don't understand this. And it's like, no, their expertise is probably just in a different area than yours. So some of it is about kind of leaving a little bit of that ego at the door and saying, you know what? If this company hired this person, there's a specific level of expertise they have in whatever they were hired for, and they're looking for an level of expertise in me that may or may not match that. And so, depending on who I'm talking to, I'm going to need to adjust the way that I talk so that I can relate to my peer who's interviewing me, who has expertise in a different area, or my peer who is interviewing me has the similar expertise to me. And you have to be able to adjust the language you're using for your audience.
Accessibility is a good keyword to end this episode, because I think this is really what it comes down to, making information accessible to various stakeholders, whether they're an expert or not an expert. And you will meet many non-experts, or non-experts is not the right word, but people who are not maybe necessarily experts in the same subject matter as you are in any company. It's good to start practicing soon and really think about who you're addressing and talk in a language they can actually understand and everyone can follow. I want to say, for everyone who feels a bit overwhelmed about everything we said, that you don't have to. We're aware writing a resume is a skill. That's why I'm so excited about that resume writing class, and I cannot take any credit for it because it's really Angela's work. If you're interested in kind of picking Angela's brain step by step in a really cool, when I talk about this product, I love it so much because it's so engaging. It's so fun to do it. And who would say that about a resume writing class, actually, that it's fun to do? No, but it really is. So if you feel like you need a little bit support, I will put in a link. You can check out what we're offering. It's quite affordable. And yeah, if you want to connect or follow Angela, I'm going to put her LinkedIn in the show notes. I will put my LinkedIn in the show notes. Follow us for some daily insights on anything related to career transition. And yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review. It will help other PhDs find our post-PhD directions podcasts more easily. So that would be highly appreciated. Thank you so much. And see you in the next episode. And I would say wish you a great day, great evening, whatever it is, wherever you are.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.